Well, the saga of the DOF role at Newcastle United continues to rumble on. Now, former DOF Dan Ashworth has weighed in with his say on what is going on at Newcastle. It looks like we have missed out on Jonathan David. In fact, the Premier League looks like it's missed out on Jonathan David, as it looks like he is moving to Italy. And what does Paul Mitchell's departure mean for Alexander Isak's contract negotiations? Let's take it all in. Hi everybody and welcome back to the Toon Review YouTube channel. My name's Paul. Thank you once again for tuning into the Newcastle United latest news. And we will start off with, of course, the Director of Football role at Newcastle United, which seems to be, if you believe reports, a bit of a poisoned chalice at the minute because nobody can seem to work with Eddie Howe. Dan Ashworth is now lumped in on his say about his role at Newcastle United. But first of all, what I want to say about Dan Ashworth is, I don't think anything that comes out of this bloke's mouth is legitimate. You know, this is a guy who sneakily went behind Newcastle United's back to negotiate a move to Newcastle United, which ended up with Dan Ashworth being on gardening leave for several months before he could take up that role. And it turns out it was a disastrous role for him. He lasted 5 months in the job, and hey-ho, he now was working back with the FA again after a short spell in cricket. So he's back with the FA. And before I tell you about what he said, he's also been quoted as wanting Eddie Howe as manager of England after the 2026 World Cup. So he's definitely got Howe on the radar for international duties. However, we always thought that Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe probably didn't get on. We weren't sure, but there was rumblings going on, just like there was with Paul Mitchell. And it seems like the same thing has happened here because Eddie Howe didn't really have a great working relationship with Dan Ashworth. A recent report covering Mitchell's departure states that Dan Ashworth has said that he also found Eddie Howe's manner of working frustrating, preferring to work with his inner circle of coaches rather than him at Newcastle United. So this kind of, with Ashworth saying that he found it difficult to work with Eddie Howe because Eddie wanted to stick to working with his inner circle. Now, in a way, I don't mind what Eddie Howe does. In fact, I've got no problem with Eddie doing that because look at the success Eddie Howe is having. Come on. But Eddie trusts in his inner circle that he's worked with for a long, long, long time. Okay, he's been with Tyndall and some of these coaches for a long period of time. They understand him. He understands them. They've got a great working relationship where there's no problems. And we've seen that even more so at Newcastle United develop from what it was at Bournemouth. And I personally don't have a single problem with that. If Eddie wants to work like that, let him be. Because it's bringing success to Newcastle United. This is look at last season. Look at the success that it has brought to the club. Why on earth should we listen to Dan Ashworth, who's a snake in my eyes and always will be? You know, what kind of person does that? Sneaks around behind our back with Manchester United. And, knowing how Newcastle United fans feel about Manchester United, that just makes it all the whole a lot worse. Ashworth left Newcastle, it goes on to say, in controversial manner, which is sure to have soured the relationship between him and the club. Yes. Dan Ashworth shouldn't even have a say on this. He's long gone. He's a snake. Yet he's coming out in the media saying that he also found it very difficult to work with Eddie Howe, stirring the pot, backing up Paul Mitchell. But Eddie Howe has the support of Newcastle United. And if you want to go that way, then his inner circle. But it's clear from the report that Craig Hope did yesterday that everybody at the club is behind Eddie Howe. The staff love Eddie Howe. And I think Ashworth's an absolute fucking snake for coming out and trying to stir up the pot when it's nothing to do with him. It's absolutely nothing to do with Dan Ashworth. He is long gone. He was here for a matter of months before he jumped ship to go and join Newton Heath. And the rat-infested Old Trafford. That's simple as that. It shouldn't matter. And I feel really sorry for Eddie Howe because he's been trying to put in a situation where now previous director of footballs are trying to say, oh, he didn't really want to work with me. It's got nothing to do with you, Ashworth. It really hasn't. And it's really pissed me off because there is a lot of Newcastle fans who, when they heard about Mitchell leaving, were going on about this war between the two, the power struggle, etc., etc. It's not a power struggle. Eddie just wanted to work his way, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if it brings success to Newcastle United, who is anybody to complain about that? And for me, I don't have a single pick of bother about Eddie working with his inner circle, people that he's trusted and worked with for years, and let's be fair, been very successful with. You know, if Dan Ashworth came in with ideas, again, like Paul Mitchell, and Eddie didn't like those ideas, Eddie's not going to sit there and just be a yes man, is he? We know he's not. Eddie Howe can be ruthless behind the scenes and really does, he believes in his own ideas. He believes what he is doing is right. And for me, that's the perfect way to go on, because if you're a manager of a football club and you have any doubts about the way you are working, it's not going to be a success at all. You have to have belief in yourself, first of all, in any kind of job, never mind football management. If you don't have belief in yourself and what you're doing, to shrug off all the people who think you can't do it, then you'll fail. But I just think, you know, Dan Ashworth coming out with quotes like this, it really does piss me off. And I would imagine pisses a lot of Newcastle fans off because of what he did. Who is he to have a go at Eddie Howe? When he was like slying off behind the scenes, having chats with Manchester United, negotiating contracts. The man's an utter bell end. However, it seems things were very different from Eddie Howe's point of view when Dan Ashworth left the club. Obviously frustration from Dan Ashworth's side, but Eddie was concerned. He was full of praise for Dan Ashworth leaving, and said that he was a great guy, great to work with, and he was very disappointed with, you know, his ideas weren't going to come to fruition at Newcastle. So why is Paul Mitchell throwing Eddie under the bus? Sorry, Ashworth. Well, Mitchell's doing it as well, of course, but it just seems like Eddie Howe here is being targeted by two director of footballs, and for me, it's going to make it very difficult for Mitchell in the final month that he's working at Newcastle United, because, you know, Eddie Howe's going to do things his way. There's no doubt about that. And that will all make things very, very difficult. But I'm getting pissed off, to be honest. You know, these stories coming out trying to throw Eddie under the bus. The Newcastle fans will stand by Eddie Howe. There's no doubt in all of this. Look at the success that he's brought Newcastle United this season. A domestic trophy, Champions League football. Why on earth are we going to believe these absolute scumbags for trying to throw Eddie under the bus and saying he's impossible to work with? It's bang out of order. But on Paul Mitchell's departure itself, Eddie Howe was also said to be concerned. And concerned because of the immediate transfer window open, which, of course, opens on Sunday, and Mitchell's impact on leaving. But obviously, Eddie Howe is going to take negotiations on for transfers. Him and Nixon will be the main two that go forward through this summer transfer window. Whether Mitchell has anything to do with these 10 days in June, time will have to tell on that. Has there been any work done before that? I don't know. But I just think there's a lot going on Eddie's shoulders right now. And for Ashworth to pipe up like that, that's bollocks, man. That is bollocks. Now, one player that Newcastle United were seriously interested in this transfer window was, of course, Lille striker Jonathan David. The Canadian international is a free agent this summer, and he was, believed to be wanting to move to the Premier League. That is not going to happen by the looks of things. Reports this morning state that he's very close to signing with Serie A champions Napoli. Now, it's a fantastic move for Napoli to get Jonathan David on a free. Of course, they'll want to defend their title next season. They've had a brilliant season winning the league. Of course, Scott McTominay going there as well. Slated by Manchester United. He goes there and has the season of his life, proves what a decent player he is. I remember him linked with Newcastle United and everybody's saying, oh, no. But then he's gone to Italy and just proved what a good player he is. So they will want to reinforce their squad for next season to defend the title. And I think it's a little bit disappointing, isn't it, that we're not going to see players like Jonathan David in the Premier League. I'm a football fan as well, so I want to see whether they don't come to Newcastle or not. But I want to see them in the Premier League. I want to see these quality players playing in the Premier League. I don't want us to lose out to teams in Serie A. But it seems like Napoli, what they've presented to Jonathan David, is a very, very good package. Now, it's not telling me anything on the reports about what the wages are, what the contract is. I would assume that he's getting a good deal of money at Napoli. But then again, you look at Italy and you think, well, Serie A's been under pressure for a while now with regards to wages, etc. Can they afford these big players to go there? It seems like they've managed to grab Jonathan David. So unless Premier League teams have spoken to his representatives, found out what he wanted, Newcastle and other clubs haven't put anywhere near enough forward for Jonathan David to sign, and Napoli have. I mean, look, there's been nothing concrete from Newcastle United ever saying that we're going for Jonathan David. There's been nothing at all. It's been very much journalist-based, but, when you hear journalists talk about it, they do hear things, they do have contacts, so you would understand that he is one of the players that maybe Newcastle United and other Premier League teams were trying to sign. But it looks like we've missed out, and he's going to sign for Napoli. But there is other fish in the sea, without a doubt, but he is one of the players that I think a lot of us thought would do a really good job for Newcastle United. But there is talk today about Newcastle. They are targeting other positions as a more urgent, i.e. centre-back, right wing. Those kind of positions are more urgent to Eddie. He wants to fill those with quality players and then maybe find a suitable backup for Alexander Isak. Now, players like Jonathan David, etc., are not going to come to Newcastle United and play a backup role. It just won't happen. So Eddie's job is to go and find somebody who will understand that. Yes, they'll get plenty playing time next season because he can rotate then. But mainly, Alexander Isak is the number one striker, and that's the way it's going to go. And will continue to go, hopefully, for a long time. Once Alex gets back to form again, he comes back booming next season, we've got a world-class striker there. So it's very hard. And it's one of the reasons, obviously, Liam Delap didn't want to come to Newcastle United. He knew that probably we've explained the situation to him regarding Isak. And that's why maybe he decided to go elsewhere as well. Now, what does Paul Mitchell's departure mean for Alexander Isak's contract? This has been an interesting story written today to say that Eddie Howe will be taking over the negotiations of the contract. It doesn't state where they are in the contract talks or how close Isak is to signing a new deal. But what it does say is that Eddie Howe will be taking over the negotiations. Now, again, this is all about how much we are putting on the manager's shoulders here. Because I've certainly never been aware, certainly in the director of football, sporting role, things like that, that the manager discusses negotiations with contracts. I've never heard that for a long time. Yes, back in the day, when the manager literally did everything, I can understand that. But nowadays, you very rarely get a manager going into contract negotiations. The manager states that he wants a player or wants the player to re-sign, then it's other people in that boardroom who meet the player and discuss and thrash out contracts. I just think we're asking a lot of Eddie Howe right now. And Eddie probably, he probably thinks, yes, I can do it. Of course he will. But we know what his work ethic is. He manages 24/7 already. And with the added pressure of negotiating, let's be honest here, this contract for Alexander Isak is one of the biggest we will negotiate in a long, long time. In a long time. And it's got to be right. And is the manager the guy who's good enough to go in and negotiate that contract? Yes, there'll be other people in there. Of course there will be. But these reports are stating that Eddie is going to take over the negotiations on Alexander Isak's contract. I find it a little bit worrying, I have to say, because Eddie's taken so much on his shoulders now with the departure of Mitchell. I think that Newcastle United need to get more people in. They need to get, obviously, Darren Eales' role covered. And as soon as they do that, maybe they can move on and sort other, positions out in the boardroom. But I don't know how you guys feel. Do you guys feel worried that Eddie Howe is taking too much on? We had this discussion on one of the live shows a couple of nights ago. And certainly Billy was worried that, Eddie Howe's taking a lot on himself, and is he going to be able to do everything? And will the pressure mount up on Eddie? Because I think Eddie just needs to concentrate on, yes, getting the signings in and then coaching the team. But when he's taking everything else on that really other people in the boardroom should be doing, that's where it worries me. And I guess it will probably worry you, because many people have mentioned that on our live shows, that just Eddie may be taking on too much because he already does so much for the football club. He works day in, day out for Newcastle United and for success. And me as a fan don't want to see him pushed to the limit by having to do really big things like negotiate a contract for Alexander Isak, which is one of the biggest contracts we're ever going to do. So, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. But thank you very much for watching the video, guys. As usual, if you have enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up button. And if you are new to the channel, please subscribe. It is free of charge. No charge for subscribing. But make sure you hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload or a live show. Thank you and welcome to all our new subscribers as well. We've had loads come on board recently and joining this fantastic community. So thank you very much. And don't forget to check the website out, thetoonreview.com. That is where you'll find all the Toon Review merchandise. So buy yourself something nice or a gift for someone to support the channel. We really do appreciate it. But thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you very soon. Take care, guys.